In a baseball world that is filled with weird stories and unique paths to the majors, Byung-Hyun Kim may have had one of the weirdest careers in baseball history. And not just because of his background, his unique delivery, or even the fact that he was just the third Korean-born player to make the major leagues. At one point, Kim was the youngest player in MLB, one of the game's best closers, an all-star, the first Asian-born player to win a World Series, and a key part of a championship team. But at the same time, he had gotten caught using foreign substances, almost single-handedly lost his team the World Series, once chucked a ball over the fence in Yankee Stadium, helped Barry Bonds surpass Babe Ruth on the home run leaderboard, and at one point was so fed up with getting booed that he flipped off his own team's fans before a playoff game. And these are just a few of the highlights from a roller coaster of a career that spanned 2 decades, 4 countries, and nearly 1,400 innings pitched. This is the story of Byung-Hyun Kim. Kim Byung-Hyun was born on January 19, 1979 in Kwon, South Korea. And from a very early age, he showed a great talent for pitching. In particular, there were 3 things that made him stand out. The first was his unusual submarine windup, which gave his pitches a ton of movement and made it hard for hitters to pick up the ball. The second was that even though he was throwing the ball at such a weird angle, he was still able to generate great velocity on his pitches, with his fastball routinely clocking in the low 90s. And third, while most submarine pitchers made a living off of pitching to contact, Kim was different in that he was extremely good at missing bats and generating strikeouts. All of these things put together made him an absolute nightmare to face on the mound. Growing up, he played in one of the best high school teams in the entire country, filled with future Korean stars such as Choi Hee-sup, who would go on to be the first Korean-born position player to make the majors, and Seo Jae-won, who would eventually go on to pitch for the Mets, Dodgers, and the Rays. However, it was Kim who was far and away the team's best player, and his dominance on the mound earned him MVP honors in the National High School Baseball Tournament and got him a spot on the Korean national team. Typically, the next move for someone like Kim would be to play in the Korean Baseball Organization, which is South Korea's top professional league. However, recent developments in the sport had him looking far beyond the KBO. Just a few years earlier in 1994, pitcher Chan-ho Park broke a major barrier, becoming the first Korean-born player to reach the major leagues. Park's success was a massive turning point for Korean baseball, and it gave Kim an opportunity to capitalize on the new demand for Korean talent. So instead of joining the KBO and entering the draft, he decided to try out his hand as an international free agent, and quickly, he was signed by the upstart Arizona Diamondbacks in 1999. Kim arrived in the United States as a 20-year-old with a lot of question marks surrounding him and a major challenge in front of him. Not only was he facing the toughest competition he'd ever gone up against, but he also faced a massive cultural and language barrier with his teammates and coaches. At that time, translators weren't allowed in the bullpen, and since no one else spoke Korean and he spoke very little English, he would often go entire games in the bullpen without speaking to anyone. However, this didn't stop him from immediately dominating the minor leagues. In 53.1 innings across AA and AAA, he recorded 74 strikeouts, a whip under 1, and an ERA of 2.19. He was so impressive, in fact, that the Diamondbacks would call him up just 2 months into his professional career. When he first made his debut on May 29, 1999, Kim was the youngest player in baseball at 20 years and 130 days old. Right from the start, he looked like a seasoned veteran, retiring Edgardo Alfonso and John Olerud before striking out Mike Piazza to record his first save. However, he did endure some growing pains in his first season. A couple of weeks after his debut, he would get ejected from a game against the Cubs after being caught using a foreign substance on the mound, and he would end the 1999 season by posting a 4.61 ERA and nearly as many walks as strikeouts. But in his second season, he started to show flashes of brilliance at the big league level. That year, he recorded 14.1 strikeouts for every 9 innings pitched, a strikeout rate on par with Jacob deGrom and Liam Hendricks in 2021. In fact, his stuff was so nasty that he once made a hitter strike out swinging on a pitch that hit him right in the nuts. He would play multiple roles in the pitching staff throughout his first 2 seasons, but eventually, he would end up settling into the closer's role in the middle of 2001. As the closer of one of the best teams in baseball, Kim began to thrive, throwing nearly 100 innings, recording a 2.94 ERA, and converting 19 out of 23 save opportunities. I mention this to point out that he was a crucial part of the Diamondbacks' success that year, particularly down the stretch, and without him, they might not have made the World Series at all. In fact, he played a crucial role in the NLCS that year against Atlanta, throwing 5 hitless innings in 3 appearances, pitching out of a bases-loaded jam, and closing out the series with back-to-back 2-inning saves in Games 4 and 5, joining Goose Gossage as the only pitchers at that time to record 2-inning saves on back-to-back days in the playoffs. But of course, I only have to point this out because of what happened next. Heading into the 2001 World Series, Kim was making history as not just the first Korean, but the first player from Asia in general to play in the Fall Classic. But unfortunately for him, this would be where all the positives would end. To be fair to Kim, he wasn't exactly set up for success. After his back-to-back multi-inning saves, Kim went 9 full days without seeing any game action. As Arizona blew out the Yankees in Game 1, Randy Johnson threw a shutout in Game 2, and he wasn't used at all in a close Game 3 loss. Because of this, Kim wouldn't make his first appearance until the bottom of the 8th in Game 4. It started off well enough, with Kim striking out the side in order, but unfortunately, things would turn south in the 9th, as a bloop by Paul O'Neill and a blast by Tino Martinez would tie up the game at 3. Normally, this would be where a manager would take out his closer and start with a fresh arm in extra innings. But unfortunately for everyone involved, Bob Brenly wasn't a normal manager. And so, in the first November baseball game in MLB history, Kim would help make Derek Jeter even more of a legend than he already was.
Jeter hits it into right. Back at the wall. Game over. Yankees win and the series is tied.
As far as pitching performances go, it doesn't get much worse than that one. Not only was Kim left completely demoralized out on the mound, but he also had to use 60 pitches to even get through that ordeal, essentially taking him out of the next game. Let's do some role play for a second. Let's say that you're the manager in this situation and your closer just had a career-defining blown save. Do you A, give them the day off and not use them until Game 6? B, take them out of the closer role for the rest of the series? Or C, take them out after the 9th inning to begin with so he doesn't even face Derek Jeter? Here, I'll give you some time to think. Got your answer? Well, it turns out you're all wrong, because apparently the answer is D. Throw them in the exact same fucking scenario the following night. When Kim came on in Game 4, Arizona was looking at a 3-1 series lead. But now, heading back to Phoenix, they found themselves in a 3-2 hole. According to Championship Win Probability Added, a metric that tracks just how much a player affected a team's chance at winning the World Series, Kim single-handedly dropped their championship odds by 46.7 percentage points over those 2 games, in one of the worst World Series performances of all time. Now, fortunately for Kim, the series would end 3 days later on Luis Gonzalez's iconic walk-off, and he would become the first Asian player to win the World Series. But unfortunately for him, the damage to his reputation and his legacy had already been done. After his struggles on baseball's biggest stage, the press hounded Kim, and a lot of people wondered whether he'd actually be able to come back from that level of devastating failure. So naturally, he responded by having the greatest season of his professional career. In 2002, Kim posted a career high in saves, a career low ERA, and nearly 100 strikeouts in 84 innings. In May, he made history by tossing MLB's 49th immaculate inning in a game against the Phillies. In June, he would exercise his demons in New York, recording a 6-out save against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. and in what he would later call an act of defiance, he celebrated by pulling a Trevor Bauer and chucking the ball over the center field fence. A few weeks later, he would be rewarded for his excellent performance by being named to the NL All-Star team, joining Chan-O Park as the only two Koreans to accomplish that feat. He may not have been able to get back to the World Series that year and avenge his past failures, but to have the kind of season he did after being dealt with such a huge blow is incredibly impressive. And I don't think we talk about that season nearly enough when we discuss his career today. After such a strong showing in 2002, many contending teams were hoping to add him to their roster in 2003 as Arizona began to decline. In May of that year, he would be traded to the Boston Red Sox in return for another young all-star in Shea Hillenbrand, in a move that Boston hoped would solidify their pitching staff and help them compete for a title. He originally went over there with the hopes that he would be a starter, but after multiple issues with the bullpen that season, the Red Sox turned to Kim, and reluctantly, he became a closer once again. To his credit, he pitched quite well down the stretch, posting a 3.18 ERA and converting 16 out of his 19 save opportunities. But just below the surface, cracks were starting to form. He spent that entire season dealing with nagging pain in both his shoulder and his ankle, and despite this, he still threw over 120 innings for the first time in his career, and Boston relied on him hard during the playoff push, which only exacerbated things further. And while it did work for a while, it seemed like it was only a matter of time before things came to a breaking point. It started off with yet another postseason struggle. In Game 1 of the ALDS against Oakland, Kim went on for the save in the ninth with a 1-run lead. He got the first batter to fly out, but he walked the second batter and hit the third before bouncing back with a strikeout to get the second out. If he had stayed in the game, there was probably a good chance that he would have pulled through and won the game for the Red Sox. But in a bizarre move, Grady Little took out his closer with 2 outs in the ninth inning. His replacement then immediately proceeded to give up a game-tying single, and Oakland would go on to win the game in the 12th inning and eventually take a 2-0 series lead the next night. He wasn't the one that gave up the game-tying run. He certainly wasn't responsible for his offense scoring 0 runs in extra innings, and he sure as hell wasn't responsible for fielding that squeeze play that ultimately walked off the game. But unfortunately for Kim, it seemed like Boston fans blamed him for the loss. And so, when he came back to Boston for Game 3, he received a loud chorus of boos during pre-game player introductions. This obviously touched a nerve in Kim, and for good reason. He'd been a key part of this team's success that year, and he had done every single thing they asked him to. He had gone back to the bullpen when he wanted to be a starter. He grinded through a ton of pain when, realistically, he should have been shut down months ago. He had given everything to this team to try and help them win a championship. And now, the fans booed him for something that, really, he had no control over. And so, Kim responded by raising his finger to the crowd and showing them exactly how he felt about them. As you might expect, Boston fans didn't receive the gesture too kindly, and he instantly became public enemy number 1. He ultimately wasn't fined for his actions, but the damage to his reputation and his career was more than enough. Needless to say, he didn't pitch another inning for the rest of the series, and he was purposely left off the roster when Boston advanced to the ALCS, a series that, ironically, they lost because of pitching. It may not have seemed like it at the time, but this middle finger incident would serve as the tipping point in Kim's roller coaster of a career. From there, things went downhill pretty quickly for Kim, as a mixture of injuries, poor diet, and decreased velocity led to worse and worse outcomes for him. He struggled so mightily in 2004 that he spent most of the year either in AAA or on the injured list, and he was left off of Boston's postseason roster during their historic championship run. Things got so bad, in fact, that his own general manager called his contract a mistake right before trading him away in a salary dumping move. He then went to Colorado for 2 seasons, where the only meaningful thing he did was serve up Barry Bonds' 715th career homer. In 2007, he went to Florida and pitched for the Marlins, which went about as well as you'd expect. He then got shipped back to Arizona for a total of 2 games before he somehow ended up back in Florida again. After one last failed attempt to break camp with the Pirates in 2008, where he only made it through one single outing, he was officially done in MLB at the age of 29. However, he wasn't done in baseball, not by a long shot. After taking a couple of years to rework his diet and fully heal his body, Kim re-entered the world of professional baseball once again in 2010, this time playing indie ball with the Orange County Flyers. After a successful 10-appearance stint, he earned a 1-year contract to play in Japan, his first time playing professionally in Asia. Pitching for NPB's Rakuten Golden Eagles, he actually put together a solid campaign, posting a 2.66 ERA in 18 appearances. However, it was only a matter of time before he ended up back in his home country, and in 2012, he finally found himself in the KBO at age 33, and once again pitching for the national team. He would spend a total of 4 years in Korea, pitching 2 years for the Nexen Heroes and 2 years for the Kia Tigers. But at that point, it was clear that age was really catching up with him. And after 4, let's just say rough seasons, he was released for good in 2015. 3 years later, at age 39, he would make one final comeback in Australia. He pitched 9 2/3 innings for the Melbourne Aces and then officially called it a career, putting a final bow on a truly bizarre 20-year odyssey. These days, you're more likely to find Kim on TV than on a baseball field. Since retirement, he has launched some business ventures and he's opened a few restaurants in Korea, but he's also made some notable appearances on reality TV, including a stint on the Korean version of The Masked Singer and even an appearance on a show similar to Undercover Boss that focused on his business ventures, the latter of which he actually won an award for. Though he might not be well remembered in the States today for more than his windup and his World Series performances, I think it's important for us to remember just how good he actually was during his prime, and more importantly, just how much he means to baseball fans in his home country. He and Chan-Ho Park were 2 of MLB's last true pioneers, and on top of still being one of Korea's most successful MLB exports today, he helped pave the way for all the Korean stars that came afterward, and all the ones still to come. So while Byung-Hyun Kim may have had one of the weirdest careers in baseball history, his name will forever be a part of baseball lore. And for millions of Korean baseball fans out there, his name will never be forgotten.